2024 was another pretty solid year for horror. We had a mixture of the familiar and the original, but what does 2025 have in store for us? Today we are taking a look at the horror films that are due for release in 2025. Of course, as some of these films are due for a release later in the year, details are mostly sparse. But what I do have for you is a list of films including reboots, sequels, original stories and adaptations, with their release dates and where you can watch them. So grab yourself something to be able to make notes with and let's get into the list. The Damned stars Odessa Young, Joe Cole and Siobhan Finneran. It follows a 19th century widow who is forced to make an impossible choice during a cruel winter when a ship sinks off the coast, risking what's left of the village's dwindling supplies. The Damned premiered at the 2024 Tribeca Film Festival and will have its theatrical release on the 3rd of January. Then we have Wolfman, starring Christopher Abbott, Julia Garner and Matilda Firth. It sees the return of Leigh Whannell to the director's chair after his success with previous Universal monster remake Invisible Man. Whannell co-wrote the screenplay with wife Corbett Tuck, Lauren Shucker Blum and Rebecca Angelo. Wolfman is a reboot of the classic monster movie of the same name. Blake and his family are attacked by an unseen animal and, in a desperate escape, barricades themselves inside a farmhouse as the creature prowls the perimeter. As the night stretches on, however, Blake begins to behave strangely, transforming into something unrecognisable that soon jeopardizes his wife and daughter. Wolfman will be released in theatres on the 17th of January. Carrying on with the new trend in horror of making use of beloved childhood stories entering the public domain, we have Screamboat, a reimagining of the 1928 animated short Steamboat Willie. The film is written and directed by Stephen Lamort and stars Art the Clown himself, David Howard Thornton, as the titular mouse. A mischievous mouse stalks a group of New Yorkers on a late-night ferry ride, unleashing murderous mayhem on a relaxing commute. Can the ship's motley crew of travellers find a way to stop a killer creature who has developed a taste for tourists? According to Screamboat press release, Lamort is promising buckets of blood. Screamboat is due for a theatrical release on the 24th of January. Grafted follows Wei, a brilliant Chinese student who wins a scholarship into a prestigious New Zealand university. Shy and socially awkward, Wei immerses herself in her late father's research. As her experiments take a dark turn, she becomes more dangerous and unhinged, willing to eliminate anyone who threatens her work, one bloody body at a time. Directed by Sasha Rainbow, Grafted is due to be released for streaming on Shudder on the 24th of January. Then we have Presence, a psychological thriller from director Steven Soderbergh, who also directed films such as Erin Brockovich, Ocean's 11 and Magic Mike. Presence also has David Koepp behind its screenplay. This is the guy who did the screenplay for Jurassic Park, Mission Impossible, Carlito's Way and Secret Window. The crew alone behind Presence makes it an exciting release. Presence follows a family who moves into a suburban house and become convinced they're not alone, starring Lucy Liu, Julia Fox and Chris Sullivan, and is due for a theatrical release on the 27th of January. Then we have Companion, a sci-fi psychological horror written and directed by Drew Hancock. It's produced by Zach Kreger, who wrote and directed Barbarian, my favourite horror film of 2022, and Roy Lee, who honestly has his name attached to so many films that I love that these two names alone make me excited for this film. Little is known as of yet about the details of the plot, although we have had a teaser trailer. What we do know is that it involves a website called findyourcompanion.com, where you are guaranteed to find a companion who's made for you. We also know that it's been given an R rating for, quote, strong violence, sexual content and language throughout. Companion stars Sophie Thatcher, Jack Quaid and Rupert Friend, and is due for a theatrical release on the 31st of January. Dark Match is an action horror blend directed by Lowell Dean. It stars Aisha Isa, Chris Irvine and Stephen Ogg. The film follows a small-time wrestling company that accepts a well-paying gig in the backwoods town, only to learn too late that the community is run by a mysterious cult leader with devious plans for their match. Not much else is known about Dark Match except that it will be streaming on Shudder on the 31st of January. Another horror streaming on Shudder in the new year is The Dead Thing. More of an erotic thriller than straight horror, The Dead Thing is written and directed by Elric Kane and stars Blue Hunt. The Dark Dark Thing follows a young woman who, after lost in a series of meaningless connections, falls in love with a charismatic and sensitive man who hides a dark secret that turns her affair into a dangerous obsession. The Dark Thing will be released for streaming on Shudder on the 14th of February. The Monkey is based on the short story written by Stephen King, produced by James Wan's Atomic Monster, and, most excitingly, written and directed by Osgood Perkins. The Monkey stars Theo James, Elijah Wood, Tatiana Maslany, and Osgood Perkins. The film follows twin brothers Bill and Hal. When they discover their father's old monkey toy in the attic, a series of gruesome deaths start. The siblings decide to throw the toy away and move on with their lives, growing apart over the years. The Monkey is due for a theatrical release on the 21st of February. Viscious is the latest film from writer and director Brian Bertino, who previously directed The Strangers and The Dark and the Wicked. Viscious stars Dakota Fanning, Catherine Hunter, and Rachel Blanchard. The film follows a young woman who must spend the night fighting for her existence as she slips down a disturbing rabbit hole contained inside a mysterious gift from her late-night visitor. Viscious is due for a theatrical release on the 28th of February. Sinners is a big-budget vampire horror coming from writer and director Ryan Coogler, who previously directed Rocky spin-off Creed and Marvel's Black Panther. It stars Michael B. Jordan, Haley Steinfeld, and Jack O'Connell, and follows twin brothers trying to leave their troubled lives behind them, who return to their hometown to start again, only to discover that an even greater evil is waiting to welcome them back. With its big budget and an Oscar-winning composer and costume designer attached, this has the potential to be very exciting. Sinners will be released in theatres on the 7th of March. The Rule of Jenny Penn had its premiere at Fantastic Fest this past year, but will be getting its wider release in 2025. The film was a standout, receiving Best Director and Best Actor at Fantastic Fest, and high praise from horror writer himself, Stephen King. Written and directed by James Ashcroft, The Rule of Jenny Penn stars Geoffrey Rush and John Lithgow. Confined to a secluded rest home and trapped within his stroke-ridden body, a former judge must stop an elderly psychotic who employs a child's puppet to abuse the home's residents with deadly consequences. Apparently Shudder acquired the film, but it appears as though it will be getting a theatrical release on the 7th of March. However, if this changes, I think we know where it's going to end up. Drop is a horror thriller from director Christopher Landon, who previously directed the Happy Death Day films. It stars Megan Fahey and Brendan Skellner. Violet is a widowed mother who goes to an upscale restaurant to meet Henry, her charming and handsome date. However, her pleasant evening soon turns into a living nightmare when she receives phone messages from a mysterious hooded figure. Drop will hit theatres on the 11th of April. Clown in a Cornfield is the film adaptation of the popular 2020 book of the same name. The film is directed by Tucker and Dale vs. Evil director Eli Craig, and stars Katie Douglas, Carson McCormick, and Aaron Abrams. After moving to the fading Midwestern town of Kettle Springs, Missouri, a teenage girl and her new group of friends find themselves the targets of the city's mascot, a clown who goes on a murderous rampage. Clown in a Cornfield is due to be released in theatres on the 9th of May. It's been almost 14 years since we had the last entry in the franchise, but in 2025 we are getting Final Destination 6, also known as Final Destination Bloodlines. Bloodlines is directed by Zach Lipovsky and Adam Stein, with a screenplay by Laurie Evans Taylor and Guy Busick of Radio Silence. Little is known about the plot outside of it following an 18-year-old whose grandmother narrowly escaped death in the 1960s. What's important about Bloodlines, however, is that its release in 2025 ties in with the 25th anniversary of the original's release and will be the last role of the late great Tony Todd. Final Destination Bloodlines will be released in theatres on the 16th of May. Another horror franchise with a perhaps long-awaited sequel being released in 2025 is 28 Days Later, with the latest installment 28 Years Later. 28 Years Later is to act as the start of a new trilogy. The first entry is written by Alex Garland and directed once again by Danny Boyle. It stars a pretty strong cast with Jodie Comer, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Ralph Fiennes, and Cillian Murphy returning as Jim. In a quote, interesting way. 28 years later picks up almost 3 decades into the plague of infected, violent and rabid people. It follows a young boy who is looking for the help of a doctor for his dying mother. 28 years later will be released in theatres on the 20th of June. It wouldn't be a year of horror without lots of sequels, requels, reboots, prequels, etc. So, enter Megan 2.0. Megan 2.0 sees the return of writer Akela Cooper, producers James Wan and Jason Blum, and director Gerard Johnstone. It also sees the return of cast Alison Williams as Gemma, Violet McGraw as Katie, and Amy Donald as Megan. As of now, little is known about the plot outside of the return of the original characters. Megan 2.0 will be released in theatres on the 27th of June. Continuing with the reboots, we have I Know What You Did Last Summer. This latest entry in the franchise is reportedly modelled on the 2022 Scream reboot, where you have the return of legacy characters passing the torch onto a new generation. We already knew that Freddie Prinze Jr. had signed on, but in the last couple of weeks we've also heard that Jennifer Love Hewitt has signed on. At the moment, I Know What You Did Last Summer is due to be released in theatres on the 18th of July. It makes sense, it's usually set around the 4th of July. However, seeing as how Love Hewitt has only just signed on, I would not be surprised if this was a potential delay. This next release is a complete surprise to a lot of people. I mean, I'm guessing it was for me. Next, we'll be getting a 6th installment in the Insidious franchise. Now, this is not to be confused with Thread, an Insidious tale. That is a different film that is a spin-off set in the same universe. Insidious 6 is a continuation of the stories we've already seen. Plot is pretty much under wraps, but with James Wan on board as producer, hopefully the film will be a strong addition to the franchise. The question has to be asked though, why are we getting another Insidious film? We were told that the Red Door was the end of that story, that would be the last one, yet here we are with yet another. Now, I love the Insidious franchise, but even I wonder if we do need this entry, and I hope, as I'm sure we all do, that this is being made because they actually have a good story to tell. As of now, the release date for Insidious 6 is the 29th of August. The Conjuring finally comes to an end with the final entry in the main franchise being released next year. Under the title The Conjuring Last Rites, the film sees the return of Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson in the roles of Ed and Lorraine Warren. It also sees the return of director Michael Chaves, returning after directing The Conjuring 3 and The Nun 2. Details of the plot are so far pretty much under wraps. However, we can assume that, like the previous films, it will follow one of the supposed real-life cases of the Warrens. So, considering their most well-known cases, this could potentially be either the case of the Smurl family or the Snedeker house. The Conjuring Last Rites will have its release in theatres on the 5th of September. Him is a sports horror film that was previously titled Goat, written by Zach Ackers and Skip Bronke and directed by Justin Tipping. The film stars Marlon Wayans and Tyreek Withers. Him follows a promising young football player who is invited to train at the isolated compound of a Dynasty team's aging legend. Marlon Wayans is in the role of the legendary player, while Tyreek Withers is in the role of his protege. Him will hit theatres on the 19th of September. Then we have the first of 2 Frankenstein movies due to be released in 2025. The Bride is written and directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal and stars an impressive cast of Jessie Buckley, Christian Bale, Penelope Cruz, Peter Sarsgaard and Annette Bening. The film is a new imagining of James Whale's 1935 The Bride of Frankenstein and inspired by Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. The Bride is set in 1930s Chicago, where Dr. Frankenstein's monster asks a Dr. Euphronius to create a companion for him. The Bride will be released in theatres on the 26th of September. Okay, next we have Saw 11. After the huge success of Saw 10 in 2023, it wasn't surprising when they announced another sequel. However, Saw 11 is turning out to be a little bit elusive. As of yet, we don't know any plot details or where it will sit in the timeline, outside of it not being a sequel to Spiral. In recent weeks, there have been rumours circulating that the production of Saw 11 may actually be in trouble, but with no confirmation on this, the 26th of September is still being cited as the proposed release date of the sequel. With the film's release already having been delayed by a year, I guess we'll see what happens. Then moving into October, we have the sequel to Black Phone. Scott Derrickson returns as director and co-writer with C. Robert Cargill, with Jason Blum returning as producer. And Ethan Hawke, Mason Thames, and Madeline McGraw are also returning to their roles from the first film. As with most films on this list, there's not much information in terms of plot, but as of now, Black Phone 2 has been scheduled to release in theatres on the 17th of October. And our final film with an actual release date is Five Nights at Freddy's 2. The first FNAF film grossed a whopping $300 million, so it's not surprising that there is a sequel in the works. Director of the first film, Emma Tammy, returns to the director's chair, as well as Josh Hutcherson and Matthew Lillard returning to their roles. Plot details are again yet unknown, but seeing as how the films are an adaptation of the pre-existing games, there is already a wealth of material there to work with. With the release of a teaser poster in October of this year, what we have seen is a teaser of Toy Freddy, one of the major antagonists from the games. Five Nights at Freddy's is due for a release in theatres on the 5th of December. Of course, there are other films that are due to have a release in 2025, but as of yet have no set release date. So first up, we have Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, the second Frankenstein of the year. It has an impressive cast of Oscar Isaac, Jacob Elordi, Mia Goth, Charles Dance, and Ralph Ineson. Despite the film not having a release date, it has apparently wrapped filming, so we may actually get it in 2025. Here's hoping. We also have the next film in the planned Twisted Childhood universe, Poohniverse Monsters Assemble, and The Strangers Chapter 2, the second installment in the new Strangers trilogy. All three parts of the trilogy have already been filmed, with Rennie Harling directing all of them. The Strangers Chapter 2 will follow Madeleine Pesh's character Maya as her ordeal with Scarecrow, Dollface and Pinup Girl continues. Of course, this is merely the list as of now. As we know, as 2025 goes on, there will be more information and I imagine countless more films announced. But I'd say that that is enough to be going on with. Let me know down below your most anticipated releases of 2025. It makes me happy to see that while we will inevitably get the usual reboots and sequels, we also have a lot of original stories on the horizon as well. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe so you don't miss out on any other content. And speaking of content, if you would like access to extra content on top of what you get here on the channel, then there is a link to my Patreon page in the description box below. But in the meantime, thank you as always for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves and I will talk to you in the next one.